Okay. Last speaker before lunch is Tom Hoffman, who's WSDA Pesticide Management Technical Assistant. Let me just pull up the slides. And he'll be giving a talk called Purchasing and Using Unregistered Pesticides, How to Attract the Attention of Federal and State Regulatory Agencies. Sounds like fun. So,
Thank you, Chris. Let's do a time check.
5 minutes?
No.
Yeah, time-wise.
I'll monitor myself, don't worry. Okay, all right. Well, good morning. There's a few of you that were kind of questionable, so I thought I'd wake you up a little bit. I tend not to be tethered to a podium, and I have been known to kick chairs. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that this morning, so Val, if you see somebody nodding off, please do that for me. My colleague here is Val Davis. Val serves this area. Val, if you want to raise your hand to let everybody know who you are if you don't know her already. As far as what I do for the department, as Chris indicated, I am the statewide program specialist for the Chemigation Fertigation Technical Assistance Program. And indeed, that's what I do at the program is technical assistance. I am asked to come in, review the systems. If there are issues with them, to identify what those issues are, correct them, and then we move on with life. This is the venue that I really do enjoy working with people. It's those where I'm called out on an incident or a complaint where I have to put on my regulatory hat that I particularly do not like. Particularly so when we are dealing with something that could have very easily been corrected before I got there. In addition to that, I am the statewide contact for all things soil fumigation as well as irrigation. So that's my background, and that's the reason why I'm here and not in Moses Lake right now where I am stationed. As far as the things that I am going to be talking about here today is that with the increasing presence of the virtual storefronts and the fact that we are in an era now of the various GAP schemes, and indeed that's what they are called, and the greater propensity of people to shop online, there's more significance to the concern of using internet to purchase products that are not registered for use either in the U.S. or in this state. And what I will be looking at are the risks associated with buying some of those pesticides online, the regulations, both federal and state, that govern that practice, and then verifying pesticide registration to make certain that indeed those pesticides are registered. Now, very quickly, what are we talking about? In the focus of my presentation is dealing with what is referred to as e-commerce. In other words, you're using the World Wide Web or internet to go out and search for pesticides with the intent of purchasing them. Now, the point that I want to make very clear is that it's not the concern about people going out and purchasing pesticides, whether or not you do that by going down to your local farm store or if you do it online. What the concern here is the fact that the pesticides that are being distributed or being sold online are simply illegal. And what do we mean by that is that the fact that the registration may have been voluntarily canceled by the registrant, and it may not only meet on the marketing end of it, but the registration may have been either suspended or revoked. We heard repeatedly what happened down in Oregon with the tilia trees, the basswood, and I just forgot the other one. As far as the bee damage, there was an effort to really either suspend or revoke that pesticide registration resulting from just those two illegal events. So the mere fact is it can happen from something regarding illegal use, it could be something with a health risk, or there is some maybe unforeseen problem that we require additional use restrictions, or maybe through the pesticide registration review process that all pesticides do need to go through every 15 years, that maybe the EPA has determined there's unreasonable adverse effects either on human health or environment that need to be further addressed. Or there's the other issue, they simply just were never registered. In addition to the selling and distributing of legal pesticides, there's certainly also, we have to express concern about its use. Now, I may talk a lot about the online purchase of these pesticides, but even graver concern is when we do have registered pesticides that are being used in a violative nature. That's the other thing that we also need to be concerned about as well. So as far as looking at their use, do they pose some type of public health risk? In this case, primarily the acute, but certainly also the chronic toxicity. Are there unsafe label instructions? And that's primarily from the handler, which includes the applicator, as well as the bystander. This was the principal driver in the major changes that were the soil fumigation labels actually underwent here the last 3 years was because of bystanders, not because of applicators. Illegal recommendations, you heard about this repeatedly today and yesterday, about the whole issue of maximum residue levels, otherwise known as tolerances. The mere fact is that by how these are registered, dealing with rate, frequency, or pre-harvest intervals, are we exceeding those tolerances? The other thing is with GAP certification. GAP is here. One of the major projects I am involved with right now is working with the cranberry industry in addressing some type of scheme. I have had a lot of interaction with potato growers and onion growers. I was rather interested yesterday in hearing that only about 30% of the growers in the raspberry arena have actually gone through a GAP. In working with the potatoes and onion growers, it's not a matter of having gone through a GAP, it's actually how many schemes they actually have to be complying with. One grower I'm working with actually has to comply with 7 different schemes, everything from Walmart to McDonald's and several others. And then one thing that has not been talked a lot about that's going to have a significant impact, especially on the evaporative cooling or overhead irrigation, principally with the Bureau water that I work with in the basin, and that is with the Food Safety Modernization Act. The public comment period came to an end about 2 weeks ago on that. It's going to be interesting to see how that's going to impact this industry as well. The other thing is regarding the bogus or incompatible chemical mixtures. There is one product that we are aware of out of Russia that has 7 active ingredients in that material. I'm talking about a witch's brew. And then the other thing is regarding the plant safety probably being jeopardized. One thing that we are finding out is an increased incidence in the injury to landscape plants coming from the use of glyphosate. Now, why is that happening? Well, when as far as the product protection was in place on that product, there was really only probably a handful of materials that were registered by Monsanto. When I did a label check on pickle here a couple of days ago, there's currently 409 products registered in the state of Washington where glyphosate is either the sole ingredient or a combination of other ingredients. And what we are thinking is happening is that some of the adjuvants or carriers in some of these products now are actually causing injury that we have never seen before in other materials. And we certainly heard that about yesterday regarding the problems that they are suspecting that adjuvants are having on bee activity. Our principal function as a department regarding pesticides, but also even fertilizers, to protect customers from fraud and deception. And how we are doing this is make certain that when things are distributed, that they are not mislabeled, they have not been discontinued, or they're just simply illegal. And how we do that is a couple primary different ways. One is through a surf day that we did, and I think we will continue to do as a department, and EPA also does this, where we actually go out and surf the net and see what is out there. Another thing that we do is that we do marketplace inspections. So we could go into Skagit Farmers Supply, Whatcom Farmers Co-op, Wilbur Ellis, WFC, Ellen Boss, whatever, and actually walk down the store where they have all the pesticides to make certain that what is there is registered with the state of Washington. And what is of interest is that we generally always do find pesticides that are not registered. And as I'll mention here in a little bit, we will take action in a type of action I'll refer to in a little while. We do occasionally even find some that are not registered in this country. When that does happen, that is turned over to EPA, and their criminal investigation division takes action. Okay? And I'm sure this is no different in Canada. It's not only here where there's an issue. This is an article that I came across recently, and in Europe, they are estimating that as much as 25% of the products that are sold in some European countries are fraudulent. And a lot of that now is coming out of Russia. So again, it's just not an issue here. And as far as internet sales, it doesn't matter if you're going down to a distributor or buying it online. It's very clear underneath FIFRA, as far as the Federal Pesticide Act dealing with pesticide registration and enforcement, is that the sale of pesticides have been mislabeled. In other words, they are not what they claim to be, have not been registered, or are no longer are registered, are subject to civil or criminal penalties, including fines. I had an opportunity last year to work with the prosecuting attorney for the Criminal Investigation Division, Region 10 EPA, on a misuse of one soil fumigant. And believe me, I felt like a Townsend vole in a room with a silverback gorilla. When they're talking fines of hundreds of thousands of dollars and possible incarceration, a revocation of a license really doesn't seem like much. So it was a very interesting time. So, and then the other thing is that if you don't have that face-to-face contact, and I guess I'm using the tagline of WSU right now, is that there is inherent risk of maybe a misunderstanding, or maybe the fact is that the appropriate information is not being conveyed to ensure that the product is actually legal. And also understanding when terms are used, they can be quite broad in their interpretation as what it is here with handling in FIFRA. It includes essentially anything involved with a sale, handling, and use of that material. Now, as far as the consumer websites, or what we refer to as as far as the online storefronts, is that there's really 5 principal ways in which pesticides naturally can be sold online. One is dealing with a registrant or producer. I mean, that could be everything from DuPont to Syngenta, Bayer, Dow AgroSciences, whatever. Retail or distributor, that's when we get into, as I mentioned earlier, the Walken Farmers Cooperative, the Skagit Farmers Supply, Wilbur Ellis, whomever. And then the commercial applicator. Now then, we also have another sector where they simply actually offer service as a broker. So they are really doing an online auction where they really never do take position of the product. They're just bringing a buyer and seller together. And then the principal one that we are seeing now that's becoming more of a concern is with the foreign-based sales. And many of these products may or may not be registered with EPA. The other issue is that the establishment that actually produces these pesticides may not even be registered with EPA. But also realizing that even if they are registered, they may not be registered with the Department of Agriculture, either here, Oregon, Idaho, or any other state, because all pesticides, including fertilizer and adjuvants here in Washington State, do need to be registered with the department, and there is a reason why. Now, one of the better known sites for online sales is SXA, and I think it rather interesting is that when you do go through their site, they do make it very, very clear in their site, as you can see up here on top, is that they never do take possession of the material. They're just acting as a broker. And then down here in the bottom, they're indicating that it is the buyer and seller that's responsible to make certain that they are compliant with all federal and state laws. Now, simply as a broker, that's fine, they can do that. But then you have the international virtual storefront, and there are many of these. This one is actually maintained by the China Association of Pesticide, I can't even read my own writing, Development and Application. And it is actually an industry association affiliated with the Chinese Ministry of Agriculture. And if you do read the goals of the Ministry of Agriculture, their long-term goal is the sustainability and development of China's pesticide industry. So you can see that they certainly have a vested interest, not only in manufacturing a lot of these pesticides, but also to sell them. And one thing that we are finding out is that a lot of these companies are now using internet as a means of finding out ways to formulate those pesticides, but also in marketing them, and some of them are very adept at doing it. If you do go on to this one, on the site I just showed you, there's a multitude of materials. The information on them, unfortunately, is rather sparse. If you, I guess, can read Chinese, you're fine. But what's rather interesting is that if you do check on the amount of sales and where those sales go, a lot of it does enter the U.S. In this particular material I found rather interesting is that if you read the information that is available on it, it's called matrine. And if you just kind of read here up on top, where the mere fact that it is soluble in toluene, benzene, ethanol, chloroform, ether, I mean, those are some pretty strong selling points, I guess. The other thing is that if you look at it, also can reduce cell liver injury and also regeneration. Down here, it's an anti-swelling agent dealing with fibrosis. It's an anti-tumor role. And then also down further on bottom, it even deals with dysentery, eczema, psoriasis. I mean, it's incredible what this product is able to do. And I guess my thought is forget blueberries, is just start raising the parent material for this. But the mere fact is there's a lot of claims. And if anything else, it provides additional claim to their product by providing this attestation. And whatever that means, I don't know, other than the fact, I guess it's a laboratory assessment saying this is what's in it. The mere fact is that you do need to know that when you deal with e-commerce, that there's many federal and state agencies that are involved with it. So all of these deal with the shipping and the transport of materials, in this case pesticides, into this country and also between states. There's two of them that deal with delivery. Environmental Protection Agency also deals with sales, and Homeland Security deals with domestic terrorism. Are you aware that prior to 9/11/2001 that you could still purchase anthracnose online? So I mean, the mere fact is it is surprising what you can find out there. And that's why if you start purchasing materials by e-commerce, and particularly so if they're being imported into this country, you need to realize there's going to be at least 4 federal agencies that are going to be very interested in your activities. Now, in addition to that, you're also going to have state rules that you're also going to be dealing with, and it does not matter if it's Washington State, Oregon, Idaho, California, or whatever. A very quick review of what some of these are. The Washington Pesticide Control Act is the one that we use as enforcement authority to make certain that if any pesticide has pesticidal claims, that it is registered in the state. If it is not, we can do a stop sale in use and force its removal and destruction. It also requires that the dealer selling that material must maintain records. And I'll get into a little bit about what that involves. The Washington Pesticide Application Act, that's where the applicator licensing comes into play, and also the certification, as well as the pesticide application records that you need to be filling out on the day of your application, and that you have to keep for 7 years. And then also the General Pesticide Rules, which is a WAC that is used to actually interpret what the laws meant. Now, as far as FDA, it is very clear in FIFRA as far as the sale and distribution of material. It does have to be registered with EPA if it makes a pesticidal claim. And that is in accordance with what is referred to as Section 3. That is the reason why a full pesticide label is referred to as a Section 3 label. That is the section of FIFRA in which it is filed under. Now, there are a few exceptions to that EPA registration. And those are referred to as the 25B products. FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, refers to them as GRAS, generally regarded as safe. The 25B products are primarily your botanical compounds, as you go through the list here, everything from castor oil to mint oil. These products, because they are regarded as safe, generally do not have to be registered. So, as you're out there trying to look for gifts for Christmas, and you're frantically trying to search something online to find something useful, you may come across some of these things I'm going to show here in a little bit, but the mere fact is that the language does need to be approved by EPA, and it cannot be sold in the U.S. unless it is, and these products, if they are not registered, suspended, canceled, cannot be sold. Now, the point that I'm making here is that if you get out onto these sites and start looking for, again, Christmas gifts or something that you feel would have a useful purpose for people that you know, you'll come across this one. And if you look at it, and the little information that is available on it is actually, it is citronella oil. And on the previous slide, you saw citronella oil as one of the 25B products. And you think, well, this is really a great gift. It's a very functional gift. But the mere fact that it says it's non-toxic, but yet it does kill mosquitoes, would kind of generate a little concern. But the mere fact is, it also makes a fashion statement. But with that, do we need to be concerned about it? Actually, in the Department of Agriculture, we do require any material that is going to be sold in this state for pesticide control practices, either repeal or kill, does have to be registered with the department, and we're doing that again for your safety. So it does have to be registered with the director. And when we talking about distribute, as I had mentioned earlier about handling with EPA, distribute has a very broad definition in state rule. And it does include 25B products, and it does include adjuvants. For those of you who have taken your private applicator's license, your test, this was actually one question on that exam. Yes, it does include adjuvants. And again, this is where we have the authority to stop sale, use, and force removal from the marketplace. Again, the pesticide dealer who is selling this material, whether or not it's a general use pesticide or restricted use pesticide, does have to keep application to sale records. And those transaction records do need to be kept for 7 years, and it lists the product that was sold, the amount that was sold, when the date it was shipped and when it was received, the crop that it's going to be used on, as well as the consignor, the person selling it, and the consignee, the purchase taken delivery of it. And again, it does have to be kept 7 years, and we do records checks on sales. So don't think that we don't come into establishments to do them. If we see some suspect sales occurring in an area that suspects a misuse of material, we can and we have come in to check on those sales. Now, realizing that each violation is subject to civil penalty. One of the sites kind of been making reference to the issue about having to be a dealer to sell product is that this is one site, and I don't know where it actually is out of, but they take great pride in saying that they are a dealer licensed in California. The problem is they are not registered in this state as a dealer. So they cannot legally sell into this state, nor can you legally purchase from them. On the 1721 Pesticide Application Act, again, it refers to the licensing requirements, and it does stipulate in this act that if you're going to be using any restricted use pesticide, be that either federal or state, you do have to be appropriately licensed. And again, there's both federal as well as state RUPs. This is another site that's primarily for home and garden. It's actually one of the better sites that I've ever seen. And if you actually go to their disclaimer page, like I'm sure all of you do when you get online to purchase something, that there is two things that really of note. First off, it states here that all their products do have an EPA registration number, but on this one, they also indicating as a forewarning that it may require some type of licensing. But they also do stipulate that it is up to you as the user, purchaser, to be appropriately licensed. So again, it's not always the seller's responsibility. It also lies with the buyer and the user. This particular product, is it a federal restricted use or is it a state restricted use? They say if you're going to go online and purchase this material and you come across this, and I know all of you use Mustang Max, is it a state or is it a federal restricted use material? This is a point where you respond. Okay, I'm only stopping you from lunch. If you don't respond, you're not going to go anywhere. You're correct, it is a state. Is it also a federal? Yes, it's both. I'm going to give you an extra credit for responding. See how that works? Is this one a federal restricted use? It's Diron. No, because there's nothing on the front page indicating that it is a federal restricted use as it is with Mustang Max. If it is a federal restricted use, you're going to see it right at the top. Is this one a state restricted use? Well, states can require additional use requirements not found on EPA label. Yes, indeed, Diron, because of the issues with water quality, is a state restricted use pesticide. Where do you find that? Well, that's in WAC 16228, section 1231. Again, this was on your exam for private applicator's license. If you go down to subsection 3, it'll stipulate that there are particular active ingredients that are state restricted use where Washington State has determined by the use or the nature of that material that it governs additional use restrictions. What are those? All aquatic pesticides and about 12 others listed that are not listed here, but you can see that Diron is listed. Now again, generally responsible, it's the seller to make certain that anything they sell over internet is compliant with the federal labeling, whether or not that is registered by EPA or the Department of Agriculture or any department within the state that has been assigned that authority. But again, the buyer is not absolved, or the applicator, be they one or one of the same, or if they're different people. You are required to verify the legal standing of that product. Now, what is of particular interest here, and I have been speaking a lot about the online, when we do have a product that we know that is registered in this state for use on a particular product, on a particular commodity, but the mere fact is that product is intentionally illegally used. In this case here, we do have a 24C for Vidate. A quick question, is this a state restricted use pesticide? Is it a federal restricted use pesticide? Yes, because of this. All federal restricted use pesticides are state restricted use. Not all state restricted use are federal. But the mere fact here is that it is a federal restricted use pesticide. The 24C is issued by the Department of Agriculture for supplemental use. What is the use restriction on this material? Can anybody tell me? There's two important points here. Gosh, I hope you guys are reading these labels. It can only be on non-bearing raspberries during the first year of establishment. If this product is used illegally, and if this is something that we do find out that is being used illegally, the department can pull this registration even though that it's only targeted for expiration on December 31st of 2014. So again, be aware of what these use restrictions are. Now, as far as verification, there's many ways of doing electronic verification. You have Agrian, you got CDMS, as well as Green Book, Blue Book. Another way is just to go on to Pickle, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and I do have some information over here on the table on it. And if in doubt, please call the Department of Ag. I respond to many calls a year doing label interpretations. Call Val, call whomever. If you have a question, please call. Now, if you have a situation here where you see this insect crawling around your raspberry plants, weevils, that you do a label search and you come up with this particular material that has been determined to be effective against this fenvalerate. So you type this into Agrian and you come up with this product, Asana, but you feel that it's overpriced, you continue searching and you come up with another material, Xyrate. When you look at this material, it's both federal and state restricted use, has the same exact active ingredient, same active concentration. My question to you is, how do you know whether or not Asana and Xyrate are registered within Washington State or even registered within this country? Well, there's ways of doing it. One way is to simply go to Agrian. And this is one, and I don't promote Agrian, it's just that they have a very good search base. You can go up here and type in Xyrate, and what comes up, and you press on the far as the registration tab, and it actually comes up with a map of the country indicating the states in which it is approved. Is it approved for in use in Washington and Oregon? Okay, this is the point where you respond again. Is it registered for Washington? No, it is not. Don't buy it, don't use it. The most definitive way is going to Pickle, which is maintained by WSU, Pesticide Information Center Online. You just go here to this page. You have a lot of search pattern, things you can search from. I have highlighted EPA. For those of you who are interested in diversifying your production, the I-502 recreational marijuana use is also listed here. So if you want to find out what's registered for marijuana, we also have those listed. So anyway, then we put in a registration number here. We hit return, and this is what comes up. If this does show up, it's a very, very definitive way of determining whether or not it's registered in this state. What are the risks? Well, you got crop embargo, seizure, destruction, rejection by importing countries. We heard that repeatedly today. And besides that, it's a great way to destroy your reputation as an industry. And with the global gap, harmonized gap, I'm not even mentioning USDA gap. I think that's going to fall in disuse. But the mere fact is that you have these schemes, and if you don't think that processors are going to add on to their own addendums, I think you need to make certain you're not raising mushrooms instead of berries, because it's a given it's going to happen. And a big thing about global gap is with food safety, traceability. And working with the farmers in Kittitas County, when a bale of hay is dropped in front of a dairy cow in Japan, they know exactly who produced it and which field it came from. Here is the scheme for the Section 5 with USDA gap, just dealing with agricultural products. And you can just go right down the line as far as the type of information that it's requesting, including the competency of the individual that's actually applying it. The thing that you need to be aware of here is that the frequency in which the residues need to be taken, as far as every industry I have worked with, it's not annual, it's actually monthly. They're pulling samples. Not the EPA, it's the USDA Foreign Agriculture Service is the principal database that's being used now for tolerances. It's not the USDA database or even Codex. And this is the one thing that I'm working with in the cranberry producers dealing with quinclorac, otherwise sold as Quinstar 4L. If you look at some of the tolerances from what it is in the U.S. to some of the importing countries, it's a 150-fold difference. So what has Ocean Spray done now with their scheme? Even though that the label has a pre-harvest interval of 60 days, they have stretched it out to 120. The other thing is don't think that actions cannot have a big impact on industry. Do you remember what happened in 2011 in Colorado? What happened? It involved cantaloupes. Come on, you guys are older than this. What happened in 2011 in Colorado with cantaloupes? Remember Listeria? It hospitalized 147 people in 28 states. It killed 33 people, including one documented case of a miscarriage. That was Listeria on cantaloupe. It was with Jensen Farms in Colorado. These are the two brothers that used to farm, past tense. They actually There was a plea bargain with them. The sentencing is going to be January 28th. They are looking at possibility of 6 years in prison, $250,000 fines. And if you think that was bad enough, the initial fines are being tagged at $1.5 million. Now, this was a lawsuit that was brought forth by federal FDA. This has now apparently been settled, the sentencing on January 28th. Now there is a multitude of lawsuits that are now awaiting hearing from the people that succumb to listeria. It can have an impact. I'm sorry?
Was that cut through
It was on the surface, and what ended up happening by cutting through the fruit, the blade of the knife actually picked up the listeria and moved it into the fruit, and when they consumed the fruit, they became ill. So don't think the activities of one person can't disrupt and destroy an industry. What the problem was, and I'll get into this a little bit more if you, Daryl, but the problem is that their line, they had a chlorinator that they were going to be putting on their processing line that they never got to install before they started running the fruit. The other problem with this is that these lawsuits are now pending by the people who are impacted by it, have named specifically the Primus lab inspector that was actually on site doing an audit and gave them a 95% compliance rate as this fruit was being shipped. That inspector is now listed in all these lawsuits. So don't think they're not going to quadruple their effort. So I'm just going to end on this. Yes, there are risks. Please be aware of the risks. It's not only with the importing country and a jeopardy that you may cause the industry by doing something. There are penalties involved not only by EPA but also Department of Agriculture and then also at the packing houses. And the other issue here is that in addition to the packing houses, the other things that we are seeing happen, and this is the case also with cranberries, is that there is going to be mandatory pesticide record submissions. It is a given. It is going to happen. Matter of fact, if you have pesticides that do not have a tolerance in the countries that you are shipping to, they can't even be on the farm. And we were working with cranberry producers here a couple months ago, realizing that they're going to have to be making this transition. We know that they were holding a lot of pesticides there. The registration has been revoked, suspended, or withdrawn. With about 120 growers, we collected, I think it was almost about 23,000 pounds of pesticides. So they realized this is happening. They got to start working with it. They need to deal with it. So again, I'm going to stop there, Chris, for time.
Can you do away with this area? I'm not too familiar with it, but can you do away with it by just washing clean water rather than having to chlorine?
You're getting into an arena here that you're going to have to talk to somebody that knows a lot more about this than what I do.
Okay. Tom, are you going to be around at all? For
Yes,
a little bit?
I will be.
Okay. So let's thank Tom.